She was just living her life, walking the streets she'd known for years, in a neighborhood she helped build. But one wrong look, one assumption, and everything changed in an instant. Doors closed, eyes turned away, and authorities showed up, not for her protection, but because someone decided her very presence was a problem. What unfolded next wasn't just harassment. It revealed a hidden system designed to silence and control. How far would they go to enforce a power they had no right to claim? But the worst was yet to come, and it would hit closer to home than anyone expected. This ends with a rehook that naturally leads into the setup, keeping viewers hooked for what happens next. Marcus Whitfield thought moving to Lake Harmon would be the fresh start he and his daughter Zoe desperately needed. A quiet town, mist rising off the lake at dawn, the smell of pine in the air. This was the kind of peace he had imagined after years of corporate grind and a messy divorce. He spent mornings teaching Zoe to fish on their dock, evenings fixing the old 1970s ranch house, feeling proud of each splinter and stain earned through honest work. Life was simple, predictable, safe, but beneath the calm, something was stirring. Neighbors whispered. One woman in particular, Darlene Crestwood, seemed to take an unusual interest in their lives. What Marcus didn't yet realize was that this quiet community had rules he hadn't agreed to, and some of them were about to put him and Zoe in real danger. Little did he know, the peaceful mornings on the lake were about to turn into a battle he couldn't ignore. The mornings started like any other. Marcus and Zoe were on the dock, casting lines into the still waters, the mist curling around their legs, the world quiet except for the occasional splash of a fish. But then came the sudden snap of footsteps behind them, sharp, insistent. He looked up. Darlene Crestwood, her face tight, eyes narrowed, pointing at Zoe like she was a criminal. "You can't be here," she said, voice sharp and cold. "This is private property. You don't belong." Marcus's stomach dropped. He knew this was his land, his dock. But the word stung differently because Zoe was staring at him, wide-eyed, clutching her rod, confused and scared. The fear in her little face made anger spike in Marcus's chest. "We're on our property," he said, voice steady. "You need to leave." Darlene's lips curled into a smirk. She pulled out her phone, snapping pictures, filming. "I'm documenting everything. You think you can just ignore the rules? I could call the sheriff right now." And she did. Minutes later, the wail of sirens shattered the morning calm. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up, lights reflecting off the misty lake. The officer stepped out, badge gleaming, a polite but wary expression on his face. Marcus calmly explained the situation, showing his property deed, the survey maps, and records proving the land was his. But Darlene's words had already been whispered into the right ears. The officer's body language shifted slightly, hesitant. I have to respond to complaints," he said. The tension tightened like a noose. Zoe squeezed her father's hand, trembling. Marcus felt a surge of helplessness and rage. The system, the law, the very people meant to protect them, they were being manipulated. He knew Darlene had done this before, twisting authority to intimidate families. And now, his daughter was caught in the crossfire. Days turned into a blur of calls, meetings, and confrontations. Darlene appeared at every community gathering, a shadow of judgment in her perfectly pressed clothes. She emailed the school, insinuating Marcus was unfit, turning Zoe's teachers and classmates against them. Friends in town hesitated to speak, fearing her influence. Each interaction revealed more. This wasn't about property. It was about power, control, and fear. Marcus began documenting everything: dates, times, conversations, photos, receipts. He discovered neighbors quietly paying Darlene fees for lake maintenance. That never happened. $500 here, $1,200 there, adding up to tens of thousands over the years. Fraud hidden in plain sight. The more he dug, the clearer it became. She was using her social status to exploit the very people she claimed to protect. But it wasn't just money. It was Zoe's innocence, the sense of safety in their new home, being eroded day by day. The quiet evenings by the lake turned into tense standoffs. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar car, felt like a threat. And yet, Marcus couldn't back down. Each time Darlene tried to corner him, he realized her arrogance was a weakness. She thought she was untouchable, that her influence, her threats, and her so-called rules would keep everyone in line. She didn't know the records were there, buried in decades-old archives, waiting for someone to uncover the truth. And Marcus was that someone. But as he pieced together the ownership, the unpaid fees, and the manipulated complaints, he knew he was walking a tightrope. One wrong move could make things worse. Not just for him, but for Zoe. Then came the breakthrough. A single document, dusted off in the county records, that could change everything. His heart pounded as he realized what it meant and what he could finally do. The quiet lakeside mornings were over. The reckoning was coming. Rehook line. What Marcus discovered next didn't just threaten Darlene's control. It could expose her entire scheme and finally give the neighbors a justice they had been denied for years. Marcus stood at the edge of the community hall, heart hammering, clutching the stack of documents that could finally expose Darlene's scheme. The room was packed, neighbors whispering, eyes darting between him and the woman who had made their lives miserable for years. Darlene sat at the front calm, smiling, as if she already owned everyone in the room. Her confidence was suffocating, the air thick with tension. He cleared his throat. "Everyone here deserves to know the truth," he said, voice shaking but firm. The papers trembled in his hands. Darlene's smile faltered slightly, a flicker of unease crossing her face. But it didn't last. She leaned back, arms crossed, ready to dismiss him. Marcus took a deep breath and began. "These documents show years of fraudulent claims, manipulated complaints, and intimidation." He laid the first paper on the table for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She's been using her influence to pressure homeowners, to harass families, and to profit from our fear. This is evidence." Darlene's eyes narrowed. "That's a lie," she snapped, standing. "Fabricated nonsense. You can't prove anything." But Marcus wasn't finished. Each page he presented revealed more hidden fees, falsified reports, emails threatening neighbors, and even misused sheriff complaints. The room grew tense. Whispers became murmurs of disbelief and anger. A few neighbors stood, pointing to receipts they had saved for years, finally connecting the dots. The evidence was undeniable. Then Darlene lunged forward, voice rising. "You think a bunch of papers can take me down? People like you don't belong here." Her words were sharp, cutting to the room, but Marcus felt something inside him snap. He had spent months documenting, researching, and preparing for this moment, and now the walls of fear she had built were cracking. "People like me?" he said, voice louder, steadier. "People like me? We're your neighbors, your community. And for too long, you've used your power to keep us silent." Every eye in the room turned to him. He could see Zoe clenching her small fists, her face pale but proud, standing beside him. Darlene's hand shook slightly. Marcus pressed on, reading aloud the most damning evidence. The official property records proving ownership, letters from the county revealing ignored complaints, and invoices showing the unpaid fees she had demanded from other families. The room erupted in murmurs, disbelief, and rising outrage. The sheriff, who had hesitated for weeks, stepped forward. "Based on this evidence, there will be a full investigation into Miss Crestwood's actions. No one is above the law." His voice was firm, carrying authority. The tension in the room cracked like a dam. Relief mingled with fury. And for the first time, Darlene looked genuinely afraid. Her eyes darted around, realizing control she had wielded for years was slipping. Marcus's chest heaved, adrenaline surging. He felt the weight of injustice, the long nights of fear, the threats, the silent intimidation, beginning to lift. This was a turning point. But he also knew it wasn't over. Darlene tried one last desperate move, raising her voice to rally the remaining allies, but was too late. The evidence, the truth, and the courage of those she tried to suppress had dismantled her power in minutes. The room shifted, the community rallying together, emboldened by the moment. Marcus looked down at Zoe, seeing her eyes wide, shining with a mix of pride and relief. She whispered, "We did it, Dad." But Marcus knew that victory was fragile and that justice would still take time. For now, though, they had taken back their voice. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred, as the gravity of what had just happened sank in. And in that moment, Marcus realized something chilling yet empowering. This was bigger than one family, one dock, one community. It was a fight for every voice silenced by fear and prejudice. Rehook-line. But as the doors closed and the whispers faded, Marcus knew the real challenge was only beginning, making sure the truth would stick, and that Darlene's reign of intimidation would never return. The room had emptied, but the weight of what had happened lingered. Marcus sat on the front steps of the community hall, the evening air heavy yet somehow lighter than it had felt for years. He looked at Zoe, holding her hand tightly, and realized something profound. The fear that shadowed their lives, the constant uncertainty, had finally begun to lift. But the memory of Darlene's words, the venom she had tried to pour into their neighborhood, would never completely disappear. Justice had been served, at least for now. The investigation had begun. Neighbors felt empowered, and a long-standing silence had been broken. Yet Marcus knew that this victory was not just theirs. It belonged to every family who had been marginalized, silenced, or intimidated because of who they were. It was a reminder that injustice often hides in plain sight, and courage is a spark that can expose it. As he walked home that night, Marcus reflected on the subtle, insidious ways racism and prejudice infiltrate our daily lives, the unchecked power, the whispered threats, the silent complicity. One person standing up, one community refusing to turn a blind eye, could ripple outward in ways no one could predict. It wasn't just about exposing Darlene. It was about reclaiming dignity, fairness, and the right to be seen and heard. He realized that while fear can paralyze, action, courageous, persistent action, can transform. The fight for justice isn't always loud or immediate, but each small victory matters. Each voice raised, each story shared, chips away at a system built on silence and oppression. And so, Marcus asked himself, in the world how many more voices are being silenced right now, waiting for someone to stand up? How many stories go untold, lives disrupted by prejudice and fear? Because change begins with acknowledgement, with courage, and with the refusal to let injustice go unseen. Will we be the ones to step forward, or will we remain silent, watching history repeat itself?